I've told you how much I've loved these videos of late, right, Chris?
They're amazing.
Oh my
They're
gosh,
just so great.
I can't like them and retweet them fast enough. It's and they've been frequent because it's every time the Cowboys lose, and they've lost 3 in a row. Here's Stephen A. Smith at work after the Cowboys lost to the Jets. Roll it.
J-E-T-S, Jets. Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. How about the Cowboys? See y'all tomorrow.
Oh my gosh. And of course, the Tomorrow was First Take that airs every single weekday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern on ESPN. He is Stephen A. Smith. That is just virtuoso material, Stephen A.
Hey, what's going on, Rich? How you doing, man? Man, you can't make it up, man. They're the gift that keeps on giving, man. They just won't let you down. I try to tell everybody. I try to tell them.
Oh my God! So walk me through it. So you're just sitting in a hotel room? Is that what you're doing, or like?
No. That was my bedroom at home.
Okay.
I mean, I was watching it, and my family was open and stuff like that. And it's a shame because I'm very fond of Jerry Jones. I actually love him.
Right.
I had the pleasure of meeting Stephen Jones. Really like him. And I know the Dallas Cowboys are a talented team, and I'm really, really good friends with Prime Time, Michael Irvin, guys like that.
Yeah.
So it's never the Cowboys. It's just the fans. I really, really, really despise Cowboys fans. And unfortunately, when the Cowboys lose, it's a hard thing because you're going off and enjoying it if you're me. But it's not really about the Cowboys losing. It's about the fans' misery. I think that Cowboy fans are the most disgusting, nauseating fan base in American history. I can't stand them. No matter what they do, they can go 1-15, they can go 3-13. The season could end on a January 3rd or something like that at 7 o'clock. And by 7:15, they're like, we're going to win the Super Bowl next year, right? And I mean, it's just, I can't stand them. I really can't stand Cowboy fans. So that's where all of that comes from. It's not even about the team.
Yeah.
It's about their fan base, which I despise.
So that's part Hollis, Queens, and then your time in Philadelphia, right, with the Inquirer and all that. You just put it all together.
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with Philly. It's me growing up surrounded by Cowboy fans all my life, friends, family members, people like that, and they're all the same. They're all the same. They never take any moment to smell themselves at all. When they stink and they stench up the place, it doesn't matter. You know what? They're going to win the Super Bowl next year, Rich. Trust me when I tell you. Talk to them. They won't even wait 15, 20 minutes. I'm trying to tell you, they won't wait a day. They won't wait a week, nothing like that. And literally minutes later, after a sorry season, they'll still tell you they're going to win the Super Bowl. That's why I can't stand it.
Well, what do you think is ailing them in all seriousness right now? 3-0 to 3-3. What do you think the issue is right now, Stephen A.?
Coaching. I mean, I think that when you look at their defense, from a talent perspective, they're there. Obviously, they had a better year last year, but with Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch and even Sean Lee back there, the bottom line is that they've got a whole bunch of talent. Injuries have derailed them to some degree. A couple of tackles on their offensive line. Obviously, you got to take that into consideration. Last week, Amari Cooper got hurt. Michael Gallup was out the week before. Randall Cobb was out this week. So injuries play a role, but there are coaches that have had less talent that have had more success. And at some point in time, you could hold Jerry Jones accountable, but primarily at this point, it's for keeping Jason Garrett in that position. 10 years on the job, 3 times he's made the playoffs, 2 playoff victories in 10 years, and they call themselves America's team. It's really unacceptable in the grand scheme of things, in all seriousness. The only reason why Jason Garrett still has this job as head coach is because Jerry Jones clearly has a personal affection for him. If he was any place else outside of Cincinnati, because they did leave Marvin Lewis in that position for 16 years without one single playoff victory, if it was anybody else outside of Cincinnati, Jason Garrett would have been gone by now. But Jerry Jones loves him. and that's what the situation is.
Yeah, so you don't buy it that Jerry says this past week, he said that if Jason Garrett was on the free agent market, he would have a gig right away. You don't think so?
Well, I don't think so, but I won't say hell no. I won't say it that emphatically because Jason Garrett is an incredibly nice guy by everybody that I know that met him. I've never had the pleasure of meeting him. Everybody says that he's an incredibly nice guy. And you do have those guys that just they have that ability to cultivate a relationship with those in positions of influence and power where you're inclined to give them a chance simply because you like them. But if you're looking at this guy's record, there's no excuse for him to still be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Let's take, for example, Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, his record is better than everybody's outside of Bill Belichick over the last decade or so. And, you know, folks were talking about how he needed to go from last year. They're damn sure talking about how he needs to go down. And he's won nearly 65% of the games. He's been in numerous AFC championships. He's been to a couple of Super Bowls. He's won a Super Bowl championship and has never had a losing record in his career. But they talk about how there needs to be change in Pittsburgh. But in Dallas, no such thing because Jason Garrett is boys with Jerry Jones. That's what I find to be sad. But I will applaud Jerry Jones for the fact that he did not offer or allow Jason Garrett to receive an extension on that contract after last season. He sat up there and said, if I'm going to hold players accountable, it's only right and fair that I do the same when it comes to Jason Garrett. And I agree with that kind of thinking right now.
The one and only Stephen A. Smith here on the Rich Eisen Show. So who's the best team in the NFL right now, do you think?
It's a tough call because on one hand, the Patriots to me have the top-rated defense, one would argue. We talked about the Patriots and Chicago battling for that, but now we've got to pay attention to San Francisco, regardless of what Richard Sherman says, pulling a Michael Irvin, keeping the same intensity. Please don't lose the intensity. Keep the same intensity.
Did that
kind of stuff. But the bottom line is San Francisco's only allowing 12.8 points per game. Their defense is incredibly stout. You got Richard Sherman and those boys in the secondary. You got Nick Bosa and those boys on the defensive line, and they're going after the passer. So they look impressive, but I'm not sold on them, even though they got the number 2 rushing attack, or Breida and those boys, because I'm still not sold on Jimmy Garoppolo. He's the type that won't necessarily beat himself, but is he that dude that can really take you over the hump? I'm not sure as of yet. I would look at New Orleans, what they're doing without Drew Brees, 4-0, undefeated, with Teddy Bridgewater holding down the fort. Certainly not stellar offensively, but their defense has really stepped it up. Just imagine what they're going to be able to do if Drew Brees comes back looking like we expect Drew Brees to look. I think a safe argument can be made that New Orleans should be labeled as the team to beat, although we can never ignore New England. So I just look at it that way. And we obviously can't ignore Kansas City because of Patrick Mahomes. And I would tell you to keep your eyes on Houston because Deshaun Watson is emerging as a superstar in this league, and it's time that we show him the respect that he deserves.
Yeah, he beat the MVP in his own house last week,
right.
and we're going to see, again, Thursday Night Football tonight between the Chiefs and the Broncos to kick things off. I would be remiss if I didn't use some of my remaining time, Stephen A. Smith, with you about the fact the NBA season will tip off in a week, and the games can't come fast enough for that league right now.
Right.
How much of a, if you will, ding do you think or stain will be left on LeBron's legacy based on his stance of Daryl Morey and what's going on with the league in China, Stephen A. Smith?
Well, listen, I definitely think he mishandled situations. First things first, he was wrong to say that Daryl Morey was misinformed. He was not misinformed. He was wrong to say that Daryl Morey was thinking about himself instead of others because clearly when you're talking about standing for freedom and to support Hong Kong, he was not thinking about himself. Now, do I think it was wise for Daryl Morey to send that tweet out? No. You're an executive in the National Basketball Association for one of the storied franchises in existence right now because the Houston Rockets clearly are formidable. They're not champions, but they're clearly formidable. My problem with Daryl Morey was sending that tweet at the time that he elected to do so. Having said all of that, still in all, LeBron James is somewhat stained because he came across as focusing and prioritizing dollars and cents as opposed to human rights, when it was perfectly within his realm to sit up there and say, I'm a black man, I'm an American, and I support human rights, civil rights, and democracy everywhere. That's all he had to say. He didn't have to do anything more than that, but he should have at least done that. So in that regard, I would tell you it's somewhat of a stain on them. But what I would ask the public to think about is who we're talking about here. We're talking about a person renowned for being conscientious. He's been a conscientious observer. He spoke out on things and took a stance on things and has tried to give a voice to the voiceless about a plethora of things and issues that have really, really invaded our society. By and large, he's been an incredible role model. He's a superstar that stepped out on the court every night throughout his career and has never cheated us with his effort, his commitment to excellence, his conditioning, et cetera, et cetera. He's been philanthropic in so many ways, particularly with the schools in Akron and other things that he has done. He's been a brilliant businessman as well, and we obviously know he has business interests in China. So all of those things should not, his one remark or mishap in terms of speaking on the issue of China and the NBA should not erase all the good that he has done. And then on top of it all, I would also like to remind folks is that regardless of how badly we want these guys to be this at times, Rich, they're not statesmen. You know, Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell have had to speak on issues, and Hillary Rodham Clinton has had to speak on issues. It amazes me how we have superstar athletes in their 30s who never had a reason in hell to pay any kind of attention or to speak on geopolitical issues. Suddenly, it's so important for us to hear from them. I think it's incredibly unfair to them, particularly when Daryl Morey is the one that gave the tweet, and we haven't heard a word from him since that time because he's obviously been silenced by the NBA and, in particular, Houston Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta. So I would ask people to take that into consideration and try not to hold LeBron James too accountable or too responsible for not elocuting words in the perfect fashion. That's not exactly his lane. He needs to know that for the future, but we all need to know that now in order to give him the kind of break he deserves because he's a superstar that has conducted himself in pristine fashion throughout his career. And I think it's incredibly unfortunate and sad that people are ready to pounce on him over this issue.
Yeah, because obviously nobody's got a platform like him. So if he was going to use it for social issues and civil rights issues here in the United States, a lot of folks thought he should have done it for the world at large. And so do you think? I
agree with that.
Right. And so
I agree with that. And I understand it. But what I'm saying is that that's where he needs to learn. Because, again, regardless of what you feel, like, for example, when he has spoken out against President Trump and others, well, again, if you're willing to step out and take a stance on those issues,
right,
it's entirely right for people to want to hear from him on this. I'm simply talking about judging him for the imperfect manner in which he articulated himself. He's not a wordsmith, for example. He's accustomed to speaking on issues, and he usually does so in pristine fashion. This was one of those times that he did it.
Right. And I was eager to hear him say something on the subject and holding the Chinese government to account. I also know a lot of people in this town who told me that if he did that, the amount of money that he could have lost from Space Jam not being shown in that that world, in the tens of millions of dollars. Tens of millions of dollars, yeah. Stephen. It is a very nuanced subject and very difficult, to say the least.
Well, listen, it's very difficult. I think that you would have handled it better. I would have handled it better. But this is what we do for a living. You got to remember that. When we open our mouths, we're gonna receive a stronger level of culpability if we don't do it in the right fashion because it's what we do for a living. That's not what he does for a living. He speaks on a plethora of issues, no doubt. But in the same breath, that's not what he does every day. And sometimes that level of imperfection is going to rear its ugly head, and it's going to show. And all I'm saying is that give the guy a break and give him a little bit of understanding in that regard. He has to take a multitude of interests, not just for himself, but on a part of others into account. And he didn't handle it in an ideal fashion. As a matter of fact, there were some people that felt initially Commissioner Adam Silver didn't handle it in ideal fashion. Yet somehow, some way, all of these adults in the room who are far more adroit at speaking and articulating thoughts on behalf of themselves and the entity they represent are held to lesser degrees of accountability than a basketball player. And I don't know how fair that is, Rich.
Stephen A. Smith, First Take, 10 a.m. to noon every single day on ESPN, 1 to 3 Eastern on ESPN Radio, on the ESPN app for the Stephen A. Smith Show. Stephen A., you're the best. Thanks for coming on. Just so you know, I had Michael Irvin on Tuesday. I said I'm going to have Stephen A. on Thursdays or anything you want me to say to him, and he was retortless. He admitted he has no retort right now, Stephen A.
Well, I mean, don't be light on him too. I mean, he showed up on First Take, with that toupee looking afro of his, and he had and listen, and he got beat down pretty good, and it took him a few months to recover. He knows what time it is when he comes up against me, and I think that had a lot to do with why he had no retort.
Take care of yourself, Stephen A. Smith.
All right, buddy.
You
Give
got
your
it.
wife my love.
All right. Thank you. Right back at you. That's Stephen A. Smith, at Stephen A. Smith on Twitter and Instagram, right here on The Rich Eisen Show.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.